How's it going, guys? Thanks for checking the video out. I want to take a look at mixing death metal vocals, and we want to make these brutal, but we want to make them so that they're still fitting in the mix. Death metal is a genre all on its own, but we still need to observe some of the normal kind of sensibilities that we need to when mixing vocals. We need them to sit in, but we need them to sound a bit special. So take a listen to this before and after any processing. It'll be soloed and then in the mix, and then let's dig in.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror of the greatest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix from the charge of a headless car.
So for this, you'll see I'm using a number of plugins. So I've got a channel EQ to start off with, just to take out a few of the kind of nasty frequencies. Then I'm using Virtual Mix Rack. This is from Slate Digital for a little EQ and some compression. We're going to take a look at that. Then I've got TDR Nova. So this is from Tokyo Dawn's Labs, and it's just a bit of a dynamic EQ, which is kind of just helping out a little bit where there are problems. And then I've got a load of buses here. So I've got 4 buses going on, and this is really where the magic is happening. So first of all, I've got the Dirty Dog from Safari Pedals. This is giving me some really dirty, distorted reverb. Then I've got Yak Delay, also from Safari Pedals, which is, you can make it kind of clean, but for me, I'm making it a little bit dirty again. This is death metal. Then I've got another delay. This is Repeater. It's doing something slightly different to what the Yak Delay is doing, so we're going to take a look at that. And then last but not least, I've got Cobra Fuzz. Now this is on a bus, and it's adding some real distortion to the vocals. What I want to do is bring these all in one by one and just kind of hear what's going on and what each of them is adding to the sound. This is part of a series. I've got some more videos that you can check out down below on mixing death metal, different instruments, and how we can approach it. Let's just jump in. So first of all, let's solo the vocal and just take a listen to this EQ. It's not doing a massive amount, but it's just cleaning stuff up. And I like to really clean stuff up first before I'm then adding anything. I like to get something that I'm kind of happy with and nothing's really intruding upon my ear, if that's the way of saying it, before I start adding. So here's the EQ off and then on again, and just listen how it's just kind of cleaning stuff up and taking a little bit of the dirt out of it.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror.
So this was that 600 hertz kind of thing, and it just felt a little bit boxy to me. If I boost that, you're going to really hear the issues that I was having here.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction.
It's just that boxiness that was just becoming a little bit of a problem a little bit further down the line. A lot of this stuff is not massively apparent when you first listen to it, because you then need to add kind of your whole processing chain to hear it. And when I was adding the compression, I was really noticing that this was becoming a problem. So I can take this out, I can just notch this out, and it just helps clean things up. And this was just a little bit of kind of essiness that was coming through a little bit too much. This was at 10.5K, so it was only a problem on certain words and certain kind of mouth shapes, but it's just helping to clean all that up. And then I'm going into Virtual Mix Rack. So what you'll see here is that I've got an EQ which is just adding basically a little tiny bit of mid-range. It's just adding something around the kind of 300 hertz area, and this is just creating a little bit of fullness. If I take these 2 compressors off and just listen to what this EQ is adding, now I've got the stuff before it in the chain, so channel EQ is open. But with death metal especially, it's really guttural, and that boxiness, that kind of low mid-range stuff, the 500 hertz, the 600 hertz stuff is really important. But it's more important that you get it right. It's more important that you don't have too much, but the thickness really comes in that 300 hertz kind of area, in this guy's voice in particular. So I'll start with it off and then we'll turn it on, and you'll hear how it just gets a little bit thicker.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror of the gravest.
just adding a little bit of thickness, just making sure that it doesn't sound too thin, because the way that this vocal is kind of sung is very back of the throat and it's very kind of guttural, and to get that thickness there, you really do need a bit of EQ. But to get the thickness as well, compression is really going to help. Now, this first compressor is from the FG Stress. Before and after, let's take a listen to what it's doing.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to...
It's just leveling stuff out. You can see from the waveforms, this is a really dynamic part, and there's so much peak information here that I just kind of need to get rid of some of it. I just need to level it out. And the great thing about the FG Stress is that it does add a certain thickness to the sound, and you can make it so that it's not taking too much away, but it's still adding some overall thickness. You can see that I've got the attack at 4, so this is kind of a medium level attack. I'm letting some of the transients come through, but I'm not allowing too much so that it's kind of spiky up and down. It's just leveling things out nicely. I find that the release midway on this, it works every time for me. A ratio of 4:1, nothing crazy. This is my basic setting for a vocal that I need to tame the peaks on. And then secondly, I've got the FG2A. Now, I'm kind of observing the two compressor way of thinking here, where you have one that catches the peaks and then one that is an overall leveling of the sound. The FG2A is a far slower compressor, and you can make it so that this is just leveling things off and just adding some overall thickness again. So take a listen with this compressor off and then on again. It's doing just that. It's not really doing too much peak reduction. It's just adding some overall thickness and adding some kind of leveling out to the entire sound.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror.
It's adding a load of thickness, it's adding a little bit of level, which is kind of helping it cut through, obviously being that it's louder, but it's just adding thickness. And I really like this way of thinking where we have two compressors doing two separate jobs. The first one is just taming the peaks, the second one is doing some overall leveling, and it's going to be much slower. On this compressor, you don't actually have attack and release, it's just kind of program dependent. So I like just starting off with the peak reduction all the way down and then just bringing that in. So if I bring this peak reduction down, then just bring it back in again, you're going to hear the vocal just get more leveled out and kind of thicker.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival.
Nice. So before and after any of this virtual mix rack stuff, aside from the buses, this is what is doing most of the heavy lifting. So before and after, let's hear it.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
Nice. So that's just adding some overall thickness. It's adding some warmth, some kind of glue. This is the main dynamic processing that I'm applying here. I want to show you the TDR Nova because it's just a bit of a problem solver for me. I've got it in dynamic mode, and if we take a look, I've got this band so that it's just being affected when it becomes a problem. So it's just in this mid-range area. What is it? Around 3K. And again, it's not something you're necessarily going to hear all the time, but just on certain words, it just helps to kind of level out that mid-range. So before it and then with it engaged. Let's actually just press the bypass because that's a little bit cleaner.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
It's kind of acting as a bit of a de-esser, but instead of it being that really essy stuff, which is maybe like 6-7k upwards, it's just acting upon the high mid-range, so that 3k area. It's just helping to tame things out, and when it gets in the mix, you kind of do need that to stop it sort of spitting through. The buses though, this is where the really interesting stuff is happening. Take a listen to it before any buses, and then I'm going to bring all the buses in at the same time, and you're going to hear how this just wraps around and adds so much aggression, and this is where the real magic is happening.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
That's adding so much dirt. It's adding kind of a wraparound kind of texture to it. The reverb is really being quite pivotal there, as well as the fuzz. Now let's go through these each independently and see how we can add a certain texture to the vocal using each of these buses. So first of all, let's just go to the first one. This is Dirty Dog. Let's hear it without and then with. Now this is from Safari Pedals, as I said, and this is just a real dirty, barky kind of reverb. You can make it so it's clean, but we've got these two drive settings here. This is the pre-drive and the post-drive. I'm just using the pre-drive. They each sound a little bit different, but to me, this pre-drive is really adding some aggression. So let's go before and then after and just hear what this is adding.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
I love it. It's a real dirty reverb, as the name suggests, but it's got that kind of shimmer to it. It's got that sort of sheen, but it's just really aggressive, and as it should be, it's the Dirty Dog. But for this kind of music, this kind of reverb is absolutely perfect. Typically when we're using reverbs, we're thinking about being clean. We're thinking about being like really ethereal and thinking about stuff kind of shimmering. I don't really want that with this. I want that shimmer to kind of be there, and it's adding that, but it's just adding some bite and some aggression, and I love it. We can go even crazy with this if we wanted to. We've got two drive circuits, as I said. Let's just bring these up and just see exactly what it's doing.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
You can get so aggressive with that. To me, it wasn't necessarily about all that aggression. I didn't want too much because it can kind of cloud the vocal a little bit if you put too much drive in it. But to me, just bringing that pre-drive up to like 40-45% was really doing something great. And now Yak Delay from Safari Pedals again. This is just a cool sounding delay, and it's one of those kind of set and forget for me. I just like to have it on there, which is just adding a little bit of bounce, but just take a listen, hear how it sounds. So I'll bypass it and then I'll bring it in.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to...
I'm not adding too much to this at all. If you just listen to the bus soloed, you'll hear there's not a massive amount of level there. It's just adding that kind of ping pong left to right, and we can bring that up and bring the whole bus level up, and you'll hear just that stereo kind of effect get even larger.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
So this kind of delay is great for delay throws. If you just want to automate just certain words to have loads of delay on them, this is fantastic because it's got that ping pong to it. So this control here is the ping pong left and right, and you don't have to have that up all the way, but to me that's just adding that kind of stereo vibe to it. I love it. Next up then, we've got another delay, which is repeater, and this one isn't again doing a massive amount, it's just adding to the overall feel of it. Just solo this bus for a second and we'll just hear this low level stuff. It's a bit more of a hi-fi sounding delay, it's got a little bit more top end to it, and again it's just lying really low underneath it. The reason I've got these all on buses is because I just want to add in a little bit in certain sections, and I don't necessarily want full delay at all times, but having it on a bus just allows me to blend in a little bit of it or a little bit less or whatever I want to do, and just have that effect in there, but make it a little bit shy, make it so it's not breathing through the mix too much. If I bring that up in the mix, then you're going to hear just a little bit more of a kind of hi-fi delay sound, but for me having it down low is perfect, but let's just hear it for the sake of it.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
It's a real subtle one, and to me having that on there just allows me to be able to send a load to it if I need it. In death metal and metal, really mixing in general, it's about movement and it's about aggressive movement here, but it's about having these sends there so you can send a load more to it if you want to, and just having that option. But the real kicker here is Cobra Fuzz. Now this is a relatively new plugin, it's not been out very long, and I think it's great. For death metal vocals, for bass, just for loads of stuff, it just sounds awesome. Just listen to it on its own just to start off with, and it's down pretty low, but as a parallel, it just adds so much grit and aggression.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
Especially on those big screams, it's just adding like a real ripping kind of effect. And I've got this, I've got this pin, I've got it on the 4th gain stage, and this is a real kind of buzzsaw-y distortion. Pre-boost is up, so I'm actually shoving like 20 dB more into it. Sustain is all the way up, so we're getting even more drive. And because it's on a bus, we can just have this as like an all-out buzzsaw kind of distortion fuzz sound and just blend a little bit into it, or a lot into it. Let's just go for a little bit more, a little bit less, and just hear how we're kind of shaping the sound as we do that.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite.
How about in the mix? Let's hear how it sounds when we bring up that fuzz in the mix.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror.
It's adding some level because it's a parallel channel, so it's just like a copy, but it's just helping it bite through really well. If I bring this vocal up just a touch in the mix, it was down at -2, it's now at unity, so just bringing it up 2 dB. Just hear how, once I bring this up a little bit, it's just biting through the mix and really getting so aggressive. I love it.
There is logic in nihilism, willing to embrace destruction. Cannot be definite error to provide a way to process the terror. The gravest threat to stable survival. Embody the fix under charge of a headless car.
I think those bus sends, those 4, are really the meat of the processing in terms of spatial stuff, in terms of like vibe on it. The mix rack is doing the real kind of meat and potato stuff. It's doing the leveling and the EQ, and that's important, but death metal to me is all about that vibe, that grind, that aggression, and these buses are doing that, especially the Cobra Fuzz, which is just adding such a level on top, just that buzzsaw kind of vibe, that distortion stuff, which is really helping it kind of poke through the mix. And if we hadn't done that compression in the first place, then doing that, when you've got a non-linear kind of device like this, so by that I mean that louder stuff going into it is going to get distorted more than quiet stuff going into it. If you're not compressing stuff beforehand, then you're just going to get words that are more distorted than others, and we don't want that. We just want that leveled vocal going into it, which is all going to get distorted and fuzzed up an equal amount, and I think that works great. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope this has given you something to think about when you're processing death metal vocals. This song was Headless Cult from Moose Cult, and you can check it out on Bandcamp. It's down the bottom right now. This is a track that I've worked on with John, and I've done the music video for it as well. It's been a great project. It's been a load of fun. Hopefully that's been useful for you, and check out the rest of the videos in this series. We'll be taking a look at processing death metal. I'll see you again soon. Take care.